Well, Cosette Duplessis has 29 years experience in participatory community development, NGO program management, participatory action, engaged research, and the integration of community engagement as a scholarship of engagement in higher education South Africa. Her professional career focused on the facilitation of interactive learning, complex social change processes, and to integrate the voice and active participation of those people, development, or learning services intend to benefit. She's currently the Research, Innovation, and Community Liaison Officer at the Rural Development and Innovation Hub at the University of Limpopo. Prior to this appointment, she was the Academic Manager Community Engagement at the University of Fort Hare. Preceding, she was the module leader for fourth-year community development in the field of social work at University of South Africa. And prior to her work as academic, she worked as social worker in the South African rural and urban landscape with a focus on child and family care, apart from a lot of other experiences. And Alida van Dijk, she's also from South Africa. She's the director for the Rural Development and Innovation Hub at the University of Limpopo. She completed her Bachelor of Arts degree in social work at the University of Pretoria and her master's degree in mental health at the University of South Africa. Her dissertation focused on the application of child care policy and legislation to African families and children in South Africa. Her current research is focused on higher education policy, institutionalizing and theorizing of community engagement. Prior to joining the University of Limpopo, she served for 5 years as director of the Community Engagement Center at the University of Fort Hare, and for 9 years as head of the Department of Social Work at UNISA. She received 2 prestigious awards, namely the Chairperson of Council Award for Distinguished Leadership, awarded by the Council of the UNISA, and the International McJanet Prize in 2011 for the Global Citizenship from the Taluaris Network. Good. Cosette, Alida, the floor is yours.
All right, good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay, thank you. Just with regard to the awards, we received it as a team. I've never worked on my own, alone. I always have a great team behind me, and what I receive is usually the outcome of hard teamwork. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Alida van Dijk. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you also for the wonderful opportunity to be part of this discussion today. We feel very privileged that we are invited. Just before I start, our thoughts also go out to our colleagues in the Ukraine. I see one of the universities is in Kiev, and I think we're all in solidarity about the basic violation of human rights in so many places in the world, and the many different wars that we fight in every country. They are organized wars, and then there are many other wars. And I think also in Argentina, we had a long history of wars. In South Africa, we had wars, the war against apartheid, which we finally could put behind us. Slovakia, we all know about the wars that we're fighting, and we all have our personal wars that we fight. And I hope that we can in some way assist each other and take hands and collaborate in such a way that we empower each other to survive wars, to manage it, and to make this world a better place. So thank you. Our discussion today is evolving practices towards social work in the 21st century. What you will realize is that I have lipstick on. I've also put on perfume. I've realized that our perfume and lipstick lasts much longer now with all the lock-ins that we have. And it's just nice always to prepare for these things and pretend that it's a live presentation, and that's how I see it. just a bit of introduction. I'm going to actually ask Cosette to first introduce herself before I continue, so that she's also introduced. Cosette, if you would like to introduce yourself. You're muted.
Okay, there we are now. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. There's another thing that I want to know. Can you see the screen that I've shared?
Yes, we can. I can.
Oh, okay, wonderful. So then we go. Okay, I'm Cosette du Plessis, and as Lou said, I am the Research Innovation and Liaison Officer at the community, at the Rural Development and Innovation Hub. It's a rural community, a rural university, or rather say a rural community. The university is set within a rural urban type of setting, but Alida will talk a little bit more about that. Thank you, Alida.
Okay, thank you. We actually have a whole history. Luz, it's wonderful to meet you at Clay's. We've been having this relationship with Clay's for more than 10 years. And it's just fantastic to always have some kind of collaboration with Clay's. Elsbeta, we've met at a conference 10 years or 11 years ago in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. And it's great to see you again. None of us have aged. Let's make that clear. We all still look exactly the same. Shall we say that?
Okay. Even better now. Because
yes, absolutely. Yes, like good wine. All right, let's start with our presentation. We are working at the University of Limpopo at the Rural Development and Innovation Hub. And people may ask, what does that mean? The Rural Development and Innovation Hub at the University of Limpopo is a center. We call it a hub because hub just sounds hip. Where we have the sole mandate to oversee all the academical processes of the university and ensure that they are integrated in meaningful ways to the mutual benefit of the university and communities. Our university's mission is also to find solutions for Africa. And the university's strategic plan, as well as mission, vision, and values, all speaks to that. It's very important for our university to make an impact on communities, to be engaged in communities. And we have very strong support from our management. The fact that our unit is pitched right under the DVC for research, innovation, and partnerships will also indicate to you that it is highly valued for the university to have us on board as part as the academic project. We call it the academic project in South Africa, meaning that we have the 3 pillars: teaching and learning, research, and community engagement. So our unit is responsible to oversee all the processes that actually evolves in the integration of academic core business. That is the one thing that we do. I'll tell you just how we do it. The other thing that we do is innovation in rural development. So what we need to do is to take any rural development project that is being implemented in the context or the communities surrounding our university and align it in such a way that it links to a curriculum, that it links to engaged research, and also to ensure that it's been done in ethical ways. The other area where Cosette will talk more about is innovation in research. To take research and to turn it into action research, participative research as far as we can, to involve communities, to get students and lecturers on board. That is what we presently are doing. The way in which we're doing it is basically in terms of engagement, We train academics. We do a lot of training with academics. And that goes from top management up to communities. So we have top management, we have our lecturers, we have our student training, and then we have communities that we also involve in training. Training is high on our list. Then we also take modules and we align them in such a way that they include engaged activities, more so a scholarship of engagement. That's what we talk about in South Africa. In this process, we include service learning components, but the policies in South Africa have been written in such a way that the scholarship of engagement is now high on the list. We're also being audited in terms of the ability to develop engaged scholarship at universities. Different universities in our country have different emphasis. In our university, which is rural, we also had what they call a previously disadvantaged university, meaning that it was one of those universities in the apartheid system that didn't receive as much resources. It was an absolute symptom of the apartheid system in the sense that only students from African cultures studied there. And it has now changed. We are slowly developing to become, I would say, a mainstream university. Mainstream universities mean the previously advantaged universities in our country. So it's quite complex, but we're not going to talk about that too much today. But it's exciting to work at these universities. We have a lot of challenges. But what we've learned is that there's a lot of advantage in being disadvantaged. It teaches you to be innovative and strong. So we're going to now move to the second slide. Cosette, if you will continue there, then I'm going to just go in. You will see that Cosette and I work as a team. We will talk together. We will even sometimes disagree with each other, but in the end, we're always a good team.
Thank you, Alida. Excuse me. I think Alida created now, sorry, I need to take a sip of water. There's something in my throat. Alida described now the current context that we are working in. If we come back to the purpose of the seminar, I think our thinking and our approach to social work student training, but also student training beyond social work, and our thinking and our approach to community engagement and service learning evolved over the years. And it is strongly informed by our own social work practice, our experience as in the realm of teaching and learning, and then community engagement. Both Alida and I are registered social workers, and we both worked in the social work field. I worked for about 12 years at an NGO, non-government organization, with its very unique, specific challenges in South Africa. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think those realities are very similar to more or less our countries south, in the global south, but also in Eastern Europe. Alida herself worked, I think, for 10 years as a social worker in the government structures, and that again posed that unique challenges and opportunities. Then we were both working as lecturers at the University of Unisa. Alida was there for 27 years, and she was also the head of the department. I was a junior lecturer, and I was the module leader of community development, and also assisted with the research module. And there I worked for about 7 years. And then we moved beyond social work to community engagement. And then specifically community engagement in two universities, University of Fort Hare and University of Limpopo, where we are currently based. And our presentation will basically focus on two narratives. The one is we would like to share our experiences of a service learning center as a social work, practical work student placement. And then we would like to talk about engaged research and why do we focus currently so strongly on engaged research as a method of service learning. If we then also think that service learning has two beneficiaries, it's your community as well as your student learning, and the outcome is learning and growth in for both.
Can I come in here, Cosette?
Yes.
Can you just go back to the previous slide? Before we continue, I must constantly remind myself while I sit here that I don't only have 15 minutes. We usually don't have so much time, and it's so nice that we can share a bit. I just want to give you a bit of history of what happened in my social work career and why I left the career. Not totally leave it. I've also always been a social worker in private practice while I was an academic, working with various cases and doing a lot of court work as a private practitioner in social work. But at UNISA, what happened at the University of South Africa is I got a bankrupt social work department. In 2003, I was starting to act as head of the department. So I was first in an acting position before I became head of the department. When I got the department in 2004, I was given a year and a half to do something about the department with the threat of the department being merged with another department if we couldn't get it out of trouble. I had a brilliant team of lecturers with me. We were literally 8 people, and I sat down with them and said to them, I didn't, because it wasn't on board at that stage, that we are going to work very hard for the next 6 or 7 years to ensure that this department continues. And that we're going to have to be very innovative. Otherwise, we may lose the department and become immersed in something else. And we also may lose our jobs. So we sat down and as a team worked out a plan. Luckily, I am a risk taker. So I'm also always willing to live with the consequences of risks. You're not always very popular if you take risks. I had to close some courses, which were very difficult. It was also a time of a merger. I really had to, luckily I was still young, and even now I'm like that. I think I'll take on a new journey tomorrow. I'm not scared of taking risks. And I had my people's support as well as also the university support. So at that stage, what we did was to open up social work modules. That was one way. I strongly believe that social work as a profession have so much to offer to other fields of practice and disciplines. That was one thing I realized, is that we were isolating ourselves, and in the process of doing that, shooting ourselves in the foot. So I strongly marketed our modules as electives for other fields of study and other degrees, also professional degrees. Instead of just attracting social work students, the university allowed me to throw those modules open. And what I will say now was just before I left the university, we had a department with 30,000 students. We moved from having 2,400 students, and you must remember that UNISA is online learning, to 30,000 students. So we opened up some of our modules, and they were so popular, and especially the ones where we were able to accommodate more students online, where there weren't so much practical work involved. But I can explain that later on if you have questions about it. But in doing that, we virtually got the department out of trouble. In terms of student numbers, in terms of the further continuation of a social work as a program at the university. And we ensured the viability of our modules. We actually found that we could manage many more students. As we developed, we also started to appoint more lecturers, and then we moved to service learning. I discovered service learning. Okay, I can continue. Thank you for that comment from Becca. I discovered so many things about service learning that I realized, okay, perhaps I must also bring in service learning in this department. That in studying that, I had one colleague with me. We still great friends today. She's the chair of waste management at the University of Cape Town, Western Cape now. She's got a chair there. That is funded by the National Research Fund. The two of us were both passionate about service learning, and we thought, okay, let's see how we can bring this into social work. At the same time, many things in South Africa was falling apart, especially your placements at organizations. We learned that our students do not get the same exposure to organizations. They don't get the same experiences, and that we also didn't have much control about supervision in organizations anymore. Cosette, you must tell me if I say too much. She's my time clock. Usually.
I think we need to move on, Alida.
Okay, so we brought in service learning, and Cosette will now tell you about the service learning sites that we created instead of having the placements. Just in short, the university funded these service learning sites. We received about 11 million rand from the university in developing service learning sites, and they're still in perfect working condition today, transdisciplinary in nature and part of the College of Human Sciences. Okay, Cosette, I'm done.
Thank you. I don't know whether I've lost connection, but I'm back now. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. So the service learning site was developed as a practical placement site. And the reason for that was, as Ida explained, that our organizations where we had to place students were really under-resourced, and the demand for the placement far exceeded the availability to help students. And quite often what we found was when we placed students at practical placements, I don't know whether you also had that experience, that because the organizations are so overburdened, in the organization that I work, you literally had to raise funds to throw petrol in the cars to get to the clients. This is how it was working. And you had to do all the marketing, etc., etc. That the social workers really don't have the time to guide our students and to prepare them for real life practice and to fill the gap that the theory cannot fill. And that is when we developed the Brightside Service Learning Site. Now, the service learning site specifically focused on what we called the student graduateness that is also built in to the South African Qualifications Authority purpose and rationale for social work. And there they say that a social worker, to be sort of ready for your day one experience, need to be able to work in a team. They need to be able to access and utilize resources. They need to manage and organize programs, and they need to communicate effectively. Now, what I quite often found was with students in the practical placements, because the social workers didn't have time to guide them, these were social work students often just did the photostats in those times, or the mere mundane administrative stuff, and they were not developed as a whole. What we then focused on at the Bright Side was to develop the student with all the necessary, or as much as possible, skills to function independently in practice. And we focused on student participation and ownership in all the programs, which we will talk about now. Extra skills development, especially communication skills, networking skills, program planning skills. They had the normal curricular-based formative and summative assessments. Then peer assessments played a very important role also at the site, and we'll talk about that. And then teamwork. The students had to work in teams through all their work. The demographics of the students, not all the social work students at the social work department was placed in the service learning site. And I think we will reflect today only on the part where we piloted the site. But as Elida said, that site is still in operation with more and more student learning opportunities. We functioned within an open distance learning context. Our students thus had very limited face-to-face contact, our normal student, with the Department of Social Work. The group that was placed at the service learning site was very diverse, married, unmarried, young, without kids, single mothers. And we were situated, the site itself, in an urban context for two of the sites. There were three sites. The other site was situated in a rural setting. Okay, the training at the site focused on the normal methods of social work, but what I would like to focus on more now is the organizational work and the additional training, and how we try to organize that in such a way that it develop the student as a whole. We followed basically a top-down, bottom-up approach, like they would in a normal social work environment. The sites were like a microcosm of normal social work organizations. The organization had three main needs, and that was marketing of the organization to the university, to the external community, the build-up of a database in terms of who's the local magistrate, the nearest health facilities, who are the other faculties in the universities that can support us. For instance, the English department played a role in the site, and so too management and commerce, and I'll tell you about that a bit later. And then the specific site that we are now going to refer to was situated in an area in the city where there was a lot of refugees. And we specifically focused on the refugee mothers who approached us because they had very specific needs in terms of caring for their children, early childhood development, where our refugee community is quite often on the margins of the services that the government provide. The student work. The students could choose whether they want, in terms of their organizational work, want to be part of the marketing group, the database group, or specifically working with the refugee community. The students had to develop in a team a plan, a project plan for each one of these three organizational themes, working themes, and then had to present it to faculty in a professional presentation, where we could comment on the feasibility of the project. They had to indicate what resources were needed, the funding needed. But importantly, the faculty didn't fund their projects. So they had to look at what fundraising do we need to do, or who can we network with that can fund our marketing, that can fund our database development, etc., and our work with the refugee mothers. Then they had to implement and evaluate their projects on a continuous basis. Mid-year, they again had to do a presentation on their progress for faculty. A very important aspect of the students' work was student evaluation. On the one hand, the summative, informative, and normal assessment in terms of case group and community work, but they had to determine in the beginning of the year, what do they expect from their team members? What work ethic would they like to adhere to? But very importantly, what's the mitigation factors? So if my team member does not come to the party, what are we going to do? And luckily, in this instance, in other instances at other universities, we did counsel students out of a program and facilitated that process based on the student's own peer assessment. At the site, nobody had to be counseled out. However, there was one or two discussions where the groups had a discussion with the individual on maybe not playing their part or trying to piggyback on the group's work. Then we had complementary training. And that training themes was identified by the students. And that's maybe things that was not always covered into the curriculum, or that was covered in the curriculum, but they felt they needed extra training on. For instance, play therapy, in brackets, we don't do therapy in social work, but how to assess a child in a court process. And we got experts in, and they workshopped with the students in practical workshops on how can you do a statutory assessment in a way that's child-friendly with a child, and then really gain the child's input. Students' abilities just to go into a community and build relationships with communities. Those were some of the extra training. Communication skills, presentation skills, networking skills were the extra training that we've done, that we usually did every Friday. I don't know if Ida would like to add in anything here with regards to the site.
Just in terms of the site, what I always remember about the sites is how the students also did fundraising to help each other. Our students came from very disadvantaged groups. They would also have a funding project where they would fund each other's transport, or even, you know, in our country and at UNISA, we learned that students must often choose between transport money and food. And they started a fund where they assisted each other in terms of needs, and the group decided on whose needs should take priority. What Cosette hasn't said so far is that she also did her master's degree on this project while she was busy with it. She did some research on it. She also passed at cum laude. She won't say that to you. But so the project was researched while she was being the project manager with this project. Cosette, you can continue.
Thank you. If I could share with you some of the feedback of our students, just verbatim. There were so many, but I just want to highlight a few. The students very soon discovered that they need to act as a professional and that they will not be spoon-fed. And I think that is so important. When I started day one as a social worker, it was in a one-man's office, and the files were there and the telephone started to ring, and you very quickly had to be innovative, make a plan and network. The students appreciated the fact that they themselves set their learning goals to a large extent, not completely. and they felt that their ideas was valued and important. The process that we followed was a strong participatory process, and the students felt that they very quickly became self-reliant. And what for us was important also that the student realized, sometimes you have group work for people who suffers with alcohol abuse, and then there's a 12-step program. And I think what our students learned, that there's no one fixed way to address everything. And what we as professionals sometimes think are important is not necessarily important for the community. And we need to start with the community's priorities, first of all. The challenges at the site, I think we've already discussed it, and Adida spoke about the insufficient funds. But what was really beautiful is how students really protected each other and literally assisted each other in a little fund that they created with transport money, sharing food. And that was really the reality of our students, which sometimes was a silent reality, not spoke of. Lack of personal safety. We were situated in a community that was volatile. There was a lot of crime and violence, and students had to be guided on how to manage their own personal safety. The high workloads were mostly addressed within a group work setting.
Can I quickly come in?
Yes.
Just quickly come in and say the outcomes of these sites, they were also transdisciplinary in nature. We had professors who were good writers, who had to write up the project. In 1 year, there were 16 publications coming out of one site. What you saw there was the Durban Bright site. That is now a building. Just to get that building, I wrote 163 emails in that time to get a building from the university. So the payoffs, the students' feedback, the actual outcomes of the sites have made it easier to get resources, and it also evolved in research output, which the university obviously valued to a high extent, and that made it easier to get funding for additional resources at the sites. Okay, proceed.
The next part of our presentation is now moving beyond social work. Not excluding, but moving beyond, where we work now across faculty within the community engagement sphere of the universities. And why we chose engaged research as a vehicle for service learning. What we found with social work training, but also any other research and practical work training that we did at universities, is the frustration of the community, where they really feel that students and university only treat them as mere data collection sites. I was wondering, Luza, can you play that video for us now?
Sure. Should I put it now?
Yes, please, please. Must I stop sharing now, ne?
Please.
Yes. Okay, I stop sharing. Fine.
Let me. Oh, I'm sorry. Give me a minute. I'm looking on the video so that I may. Margaret's story. Wait. Oh, give me a minute. I'm struggling.
Don't worry.
Share and share screen. No, sorry. Here, Margaret's story. Can you all see it?
No, we cannot see it.
No? Okay, give me a minute. Margaret story. No, you can't see it there?
No, maybe I can try to share it. Okay.
Okay. Oh, so I should stop sharing there. I can see it there.
We can see it. If you maybe can enlarge it just.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
This whole world gets me down, and there's no love to be found. I close my eyes and soon I find I've made a playground in my mind where the children laugh and the children play, and we sing a song all day. My name is Margaret. Oh yes, it's Margaret. I've got a penny, shiny and new. I'm gonna buy them all kinds of candy. That's what I'm gonna do. In the wonders that I find in the playground in my mind, in the world that used to be, close your eyes and follow me, where the children laugh and the children play, and we sing a song all day. My girl is Cindy. When she gets married, she's gonna have a baby or two. She's gonna let them come see their grandma. That's what she's gonna do. Seen a lot of children living in a world that are left behind. Seen a lot of children in the playground in my mind. Yes, my name is Margaret. Oh yes, it's Margaret. I've got a penny, shiny and new. I'm gonna buy them all kinds of candy. That's what I'm gonna do. Seen a lot of children living in a world that I left behind. Seen a lot of children in the playground in my mind. My name is Margaret. Oh yes, it's Margaret. I've got a penny, shiny and new. I'm gonna buy them all kinds of candy. That's what I'm gonna do. My name is
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Luz. Can I share again my screen?
Yes,
Okay,
it
while
can.
you're sharing, Cosette, can I just say something? So we basically moved from social work to community engagement. I've missed the practice, and I saw that service learning and community engagement will give me the opportunity to again get back into practice, to really make my hands dirty, to use all my social work skills and knowledge to bring to the academia and to introduce this field, which is a difficult field to introduce. So Suzette, you can continue now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, why did we choose engaged research as a method for service learning, not just social work, but across faculty? I think if I can just highlight a few, is that you're actually working in the real world with people and in collaboration at the end of the day with the intended beneficiaries. If you work with people, it also enhances your own accountability. And for us, a project is never just, or a research is never just about that research or about that project, but to develop a collaborative and a sustainable relationship with the community. What happens this year must inform next year's work in the community. So we are participants are then therefore strong co-creators of our knowledge. Engaged research really opens up a space for dialogue. In this instance, it was a group of social work students and sociology students, and I think industrial psychology students also, who were introduced to the local, we call it in South Africa, chiefs or horses, and they are basically your gatekeepers to the community. And the chief with its headman were asking questions to the students about their specific research, what their expectations are, what the cultural values are, what may and may not happen. And only then could the students enter that community and did their research. Now, examples of engaged research, we want to give you 3 examples. And I know we pushed for time, and I'll try to be as short as possible. The one is where we took a normal awareness campaign and turned it into an engaged research project where our community did research with us and did the awareness campaign with us at the end of the day, and not us for them. And then we started with a normal support program that we had at the universities for small-scale farmers, and developed a research project with the farmers. And our last example where we used normal 4th-year research of social work students and sociology students just to enter a community and to get to know community and build a relationship. In the first instance, and we're not going to show that video now, we don't have the time, was where a preclinical sciences department contacted us and said they would like to do an awareness campaign in a community about epigenetics in the in utero environment. They will have a day where they teach the community about that. And what we then did to make it an engaged process, the students had to, as part of the course outcomes, do a literature review and then an awareness campaign. But what we did was let the students do a literature review, but then they had to translate that whole notion of epigenetics into layman's language. And we trained them in science communication principles. And they used videos and they used pictures and collages to talk to. The target group was actually primary and secondary school children. And I said to them, listen here, you need to explain to me also what on earth is epigenetics in the in utero environment. And a long story short, it's about simply the factors that influence the unborn baby. The students then used science communication to share the principles of epigenetics with primary as well as secondary school children. They then facilitated a discussion with the children on what do they think are the things in their community that impacts on unborn babies. And with the students, they developed sort of their own little interview guide, where the children then went back to their grannies and their teenage brothers and sisters to find out what do they think What are the things in that specific community that impacts on the health of the unborn baby? And the children came back with their answers, and with the students, they analyzed it. And then the children developed a little drama about what they've learned in this whole process. The community's unique approach to mothers, pregnant mothers, and the things in the community that affects the unborn baby. And the children themselves performed those dramas in front of their schools. And these children themselves also, we call it a confirmation discussion, where we sat with the children and asked them, what do you think must now happen if you say there's a lot of peer pressure? If you say that you cannot talk in your community about pregnancy, what do you think must happen? And the children's advice was, and their recommendation was, please involve our parents into these discussions, because it's a taboo in our community. The other example was, we already had a support group for small-scale farmers. Now, in South Africa, our small-scale farmers really have a lot of challenges in terms of land access, access to water, access to markets, funding, poor implementation, implements to work on the farms. We then developed a study group where the farmers came together to share their challenges with each other, but also search for solutions. And the farmers identified certain learning priorities. One of the learning priorities was, for instance, how to farm in an energy efficient way. And from that, we developed a research project on waste to energy practices on small scale farms. But the farmers are actively involved in this. We again used science communication to develop the research proposal. The farmers provided their input, and we are now in the research implementation phase, where the farmers with us analyze the data, but also decide, okay, based on this data, how are we going to what's the best ways of implementing more energy efficient ways in farming?
Can I come in quickly here, Cosette?
Yes.
Just the previous slide. This was done during the COVID pandemic. The previous slide from the farmers. If you look at the slide, you'll see there's a newsletter. What we did, in terms of innovation, we learned how to recruit participants online. That is a process in itself, and we'd love to talk to you again about that. That's a nice discussion. Then we also, if you look at this newsletter, it's been written by the farmers, not by us. What we do is I do the graphics and the outlines, and then it was sent with them via WhatsApp. So during the COVID pandemic, we were completely locked down. We had constantly innovate our projects. Our background at the online university was wonderful. We had several other projects, 7 new projects during COVID time, which were running. But this is a good example of absolute engagement, and it's lean funding, although that the research is now funded by the CSIR. Thank you, Cosette.
Our last example is where we used fourth-year research of the social work students, fourth-year social work group and sociology, to get access to a community. We were asked to work in specific communities, but we never worked there before, and we didn't know what was going on there. So the students' title, we asked them all to do exactly the same study, explore the realities of young people in that specific community, which they did. Again, confirmation discussions is for us important, where we sat with the young people and discussed the research findings, and they had to make recommendations on what should be done, the following, what possible student interventions can assist that community, and what research should we be doing in that community in future. And what was interesting, apart from job creation, the student said the next research must focus on the elderly people. And we discovered the value that specifically community and young people attach to the elderly people. So that research then led to research with the elderly people and services to the elderly people. From the research with the young people, an action group was formed, and the young people then focused on celebrating. I couldn't actually believe that that's what they want to do, but that's what they wanted to do, is celebrating their heritage and giving a stage for elderly people to share their stories with them. That was just one of the projects that came from that research. Yes, so that is basically our presentation. Alida will continue now with the recommendations, and the group discussion, which I don't know if we're going to have time for it, is if we think about our future and the challenges that real life is posing to us. We have now the example in Ukraine, our planet challenges. How should we train future social workers? And should it still be the same? Alida, if you can continue. Alida, you're on mute.
Okay, we could perhaps have people's feedback on that slide. How should we train for the next 50 years? In terms of our own recommendations, we've learned that social work training is not necessarily enough. They need more input. We assume that they know things which they don't always know. They need more. Also, the same goes for your other academic departments. So working across faculties and boundaries are very important. I also think we need to start to diffuse boundaries and work together as faculties, as groups, collaborate in terms of our training. Cosette has put a lot of emphasis now as research, as a reflective practice integrated in case group and community work. It's interesting how much supervision goes into casework and community work, yet research is almost an add-on. And we should ask ourselves in social work, if we work in silos when it comes to training, it should be a completely integrated process. When you plan casework, group work, and community work, you should already also plan your research. You can actually have one project, one program in social work where you bring in all your different methods as well as research, and you don't need a lot of funding, lean funding. Our students are our greatest assets. If you use them in practice and in research, you can get so much out of them. That's why you can also bring in more volunteers within the university, not just social work students. Then there's a huge need for development of training in teaching methodology towards curricular community engagement practices. Our lecturers are not trained in infusing and integration of the different academic core processes of teaching and learning, research, and community engagement. We assume they can do it. They've never been trained to do it, really. There's a lot of work. We train people on a regular basis and find that they're really in dire need, and that goes from your junior lecturer up to your senior professors. They will need it in future to get funding. There's a strong focus now on engaged research, participation, the responsibilities of universities in terms of science communication, yes, also social responsibility to do real world research. So those are some of our recommendations which we can talk about. In the next slide is just a metaphorical slide. Where do we go from here? If you want to show that slide quickly, Cosette. The future is not about traditional universities. You can look at that slide. Changing of the academic mindset is extremely important. That is the biggest challenge, is to change people's mindsets. research and curriculum innovation, you can go through that. And then the whole thing of, I say, social work councils, professional councils, looking at our curriculums very, very critically, looking at what we've been done for the past 50 years and asking ourselves, is it working? How can we do it differently? How can we take hands as universities internationally and support each other and collaborate together? I think the epidemic told us that we can collaborate globally to respond to social problems. And that is perhaps something which I think should be taken more seriously, and that will happen in future, that we will also not perhaps function in silos as countries anymore, because we have so much that we can share, and we will be so empowered by that. Thank you.